So I don't want to make a big speech, not really the type for that, but I do want to say that I'm so grateful to be here with everybody tonight that when I moved to Phoenixville, 4 years ago in 2020, I could never have imagined being around all of these great people, getting to know all the people I did, and especially not starting my own small podcast network right here in town. So to those who have been here since the beginning, like Aiden, and to those who have gotten here very recently in terms of the company, thank you so much. To those of you who are new, welcome. And here's to the next chapter. Cheers, everybody. Cheers. 3 years.
I think I need another drink. Let's do another round.
Yeah.
Let's just head back to the studio. We can have it for free over there. Sound good?
Yeah.
Sounds good?
Sure.
Yeah.
All right, let's go. So 3 years.
I'm amazed that we even made it this far.
Yeah, I remember texting you and saying, hey, this could be a good way to make beer money.
Yep.
It's a lot of beer money.
And yet we still can't afford drinks.
Yeah, exactly. So, I obviously, this is not our normal format. You probably got in here and you're going, this is weirdly cinematic. Who are all of these people? And why is this blonde man, who I may or may not have seen before, sitting at the table on camera right now? If you had those thoughts, know that I did too. I didn't know who any of these people were. They just showed up and said, hey, we're going to film something. So,
We just kind of magically appeared. For me, it's like pay no attention to the man behind the hanging curtain.
Yes, but in all seriousness, for those who have somehow not seen, this is Aiden Thornbury. He is the man behind the camera, the man who's doing all the editing work here at the channel, and now the man who is going to be in charge of our editing department as we grow.
Yeah, pretty much. As we're expanding all of these different channels, I'm the one shooting all of the content, and for now, the only editor, but hopefully that'll change so that way I can sleep and my girlfriend stops being mad at me.
Yeah, so, the beer money went to improving the business and renting out this beautiful early 18th century house we now call our studio. But, it's been a process. But we thought that a good way to mark 3 years, aside from patting ourselves on the back and having a drink, was to go through what we feel are the weirdest cases that we've ever looked at. Not just the most inexplicable, but the weirdest. Mm-hmm. The stuff where, it started off and I was like, oh, that's a little odd. And then the deeper I dug, the weirder it got. Just from the surface level on down, strange. And, we mostly have covered Missing 411 topics on this channel, I think. Although, to be honest, we've covered a lot fewer of them than I thought we had.
Yeah, honestly, going back through the repertoire, I was surprised at how varied the catalog is, because last year it felt like all we did was Missing 411.
And it turns out that we've only covered, around a little over a dozen, I think.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
That was a weird little thing to notice, but, one of the ones that stuck out, because there's been a lot, and we've talked about, and we kind of threw back and forth where to start here, because Tom Messick is by far one of the strangest occurrences that I've ever come across, just at every level. Everything about that story is weird, but we just covered that like 2 months ago.
Yep.
Another one that was very strange was Garrett Bardsley, but we've talked about that one we've talked it to death. And also, it's weird, but it's not, it's weird in the unsolved sense. Everything that happened that day up until he disappeared was totally normal. I wanted to go weird. Like, from the very moment I started looking at this story, the ones that made me go, huh, off the bat.
Yeah.
And there were a few that made me go, huh, off the bat, and turned out to not be nearly that weird. Lady Bird Lake was one of them, where we looked at it and we were like, oh, this is probably nothing. Which was in some ways disappointing. Like, as a content creator, disappointing. As a human being, I'm glad there's probably not a serial killer in Austin, Texas.
Generally a good thing to be, glad about.
Yeah, I'll make fun of the Cowboys till the cows come home. I'm not sure who's bringing them home because the Cowboys haven't won anything in years. But you get my point. I wish the city of Austin all the best. Hopefully you figure out what is going on. So,
did your shirt change colors?
Oh yeah, I was just kind of thinking I'd try something new.
Has that been there?
I have no idea what you're talking about, dude. This is my fume. I always have this. It's been on the desk the whole time. Listen, man, so here's the deal, right? I feel like we've been getting into some bad habits here at the channel, and I wanted to give things a change. And change of shirt, change of color, change of studio. So, this just kind of felt right. Take my bad habits and replace them with good habits. I mean, this, rather than, chemicals or harmful materials, the things you might find in your typical consumer-grade inhalant product, this is just all-natural flavoring. It's just air that comes right through, and I don't know if you've noticed, but, every once in a while I get a little fidgety and nervous. The nice thing about this, it's kind of like a little fidget spinner. I can just get a little ASMR.
I'm just surprised because maybe I was just really focused in on the conversation because I feel like I would have noticed such a sweet bass.
Yeah, the bass is fantastic. It's magnetic. See, this is probably the single most elegant thing I own.
I believe it.
Most other things I own are from Target.
Yeah, it's a step up.
But yeah, so
it's nice and weighty too. I like that.
Got good heft to it. The little all natural flavoring stick. That one's I think raspberry lemon.
Ooh,
tasty, right?
It almost tastes like a tea.
It's nice. It's like a tea you can inhale.
Yeah, I like that.
Precisely. You get it. He gets it.
I like that. Very relaxing.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to try one, then you can actually go to tryfume.com/lorelodge. That's tryfum.com/lorelodge and get 10% off your order of the Journey Pack today. Or you could just scan the QR code I think you were just looking at on the screen.
I was surprised that just kind of showed up.
It's kind of weird,
It is.
It's weird when we do these in podcast form. The ads get very meta.
They do. They very much do.
But anyway, yeah, you can get 10% off your order of the Journey Pack by going to tryfume.com. That's tryfum.com/lorelodge, or clicking the link in the description, or clicking the QR code, scanning the QR code on your screen, and you will get 10% off your order of the Journey Pack today using code LORELodge. Yeah. So, what were we talking about?
I was distracted by the new color shirt.
What do you think?
I like it, but not for the vibe. You might want to consider swapping back.
All right. We'll switch it back.
Okay.
Anyway, we thought that given that series of kind of the most recent stuff we've covered, and looking for the high strangeness, I wanted to start this one off with Paul Fugate. And so what we're going to do here for this episode is go through 3 of just the straight up oddest things we've looked at, and that's the one I want to start with. Paul Fugate. I mean, this one started off as, a little bit of an inversion. Usually we're looking at the people going missing in the parks and the rangers looking for them. In the case of Paul Fugate, we had a ranger go missing in the parks, and then the parks being really weird about looking for him. Do you remember the circumstances?
Vaguely. I feel like it was essentially along the lines of a lot of the rangers seemed to not like him. Mm-hmm. So when he did go missing, nobody was really that interested in trying to find him.
So it's close to that. It was that Paul Fugate was kind of a free spirit as a guy. He was, he was really into the outdoors, really into growing his own medicinal plants, if you catch my meaning, shooting his guns, all that. And, he had something of an anti-authority streak. He was kind of, it seemed like a left libertarian type of dude. And so when he joined the National Park Service, he did so because he genuinely cared about the outdoors, and because he wanted to get into conservation, and he wanted to lead tours, and he wanted to study what was going on in the natural world. The problem was that he also wanted to do this while having a ponytail, and smoking weed and being late for work. Basically, if he was working at like a wildlife preserve that was owned by a nonprofit somewhere in the woods, he would have been their star employee. As far as being a federal employee goes, he was not the ideal.
Yep.
You know?
Can't say that I can't relate to him in some way, shape, or form.
Exactly. So, you and your long locks.
Yes.
Also, oddly enough, a whole bunch of people in the comments section said that he looked like he could be my dad, which, considering he looks nothing like my dad, was really funny.
Yeah, that is interesting.
I was just like, all right, cool. maybe I haven't been told something. We'll tell you, the Mattis family history does not make a ton of sense at all turns, but actually, I think I told you about this. My grandfather, my now late grandfather, Jay, not listed anywhere.
Oh, really?
Like birth certificate, probably death certificate now.
Are we talking like Charles McCuller Sr. style, not listed anywhere? Or?
Like he turns 18 and he just disappears. Which is weird because he was in the National Guard.
Oh, well, that explains it.
He should have enlistment papers. He should be listed in, the lists of people who joined the army from given towns.
I'm telling you right now, he was Spec Ops.
That man was not Spec Ops.
Are you sure?
I guarantee you Jay Mattis was not in Spec Ops. He did like to fish, though.
Well, that's good.
He did like to fish quite a bit. Point is, Paul Fugate was a true naturalist. He really loved the outdoors, and he really hated everything about society. I mean, this is a guy who, it's never said explicitly, but he never fit in growing up. He was a little weird. He met his wife because his wife, Dodie, was friends with his little sister, I think. And Dodie had come over to their house, and this is from memory. If I remember correctly, Dodie had come over to their house to hang out with his little sister. Might have been her older sister, but close in age either way. And Paul asked if she wanted to see his gun collection. She was like, yeah, hell yeah, sure. Because it was, I think, Arizona in the 60s. So he takes her and shows her his gun collection, and soon enough, they fall madly in love. They get married. But Paul goes to work for the national parks, which means that they're getting stuck out in like the middle of nowhere. Dodie, not really a middle of nowhere type of person. She, had a job and all that. She wanted to live closer to the city. So this caused a little bit of tension in the marriage. And then she ultimately had some medical issues. And remember how I said this got weird super quickly? Mm-hmm. Well, already we have the fact that, Paul has a less than typical streak for a federal employee. Well, Dodie, a few years into the marriage, develops some medical issues that make certain marital activities very painful. So she can no longer engage in them. And rather than getting divorced, she and Paul decide to open up the marriage. But it's going to be kind of a one-sided open marriage. And Dodie claims that she was genuinely okay with this, and it was only fair. The only rule that she had was that he, obviously could not get anybody pregnant and could not develop emotional attachments. So any other relationships he had to be strictly physical. So Paul is doing that, and that's the kind of thing where, while it's not necessarily against the rules at work, it gets around and people hear about it. And we're not talking about 2023 here, where people tend to be a little bit more accepting of non-traditional relationships. So he's a guy who everybody else perceives to be cheating on his wife left and right for reasons that he obviously did not reveal to them. They see a guy who shows up late for work, who smokes weed despite the fact that it is not allowed. Obviously, it's, not allowed in park policies as a federal employee because it's federally prohibited. It's illegal. I'm actually not sure if it was at the time in the late 60s and the early 70s.
I think the key here is that for both of these counts that we're discussing, these two different variables, for as popular as the Summer of Love was at that time, and, there was Woodstock happening and all those things, the majority of the population of the United States, and especially the world, did not subscribe to that. And there's a reason that those who were part of that movement were considered rebels of the counterculture.
Exactly. So, this guy who it was very obviously not national parks material. He wasn't what they wanted. Now, the old National Park Service, of the 40s, 50s, 60s, that would have fit Paul just fine.
Oh, yeah, Teddy would have been all about it.
Yeah, they were a lot more, into just being outdoors. The 60s, the new administration comes in, and it's they want to modernize. They want to class the joint up a bit. So they start to regulate hair, and they start to regulate dress and facial hair. They come up with a whole bunch of rules, and Paul's already not a rules guy. Half the reason he's working for the National Park Service is so he can be off somewhere where nobody cares. He doesn't take kindly to it, refuses to follow them. He gets fired. Now, they fire him. Allegedly, their reasoning was that he stole straw, I believe, hay, that they claimed he was stealing for his wife's horses back in Tucson where she lived. He lived at the park. And I believe at this point he was not at Chiricahua yet. He might have been there. Again, the details are escaping me here. But yeah, right. What had happened was he got in trouble for his hair and his lateness and the weed and all that. And the Park Service, the guy in charge of his spot wanted to fire him. But technically, he had done nothing that was worthy of being fired. So they just moved him to Chiricahua, which is in the middle of nowhere. We're talking I think it's something like 2.5 hours from Tucson, southeast of Tucson. And it's 80 miles from the Mexican border. It's near nothing. There is nothing there except at that time, I believe, in the Western corridor, a drug and person trafficking route.
Oh, fun.
Yeah, so that was where the drugs and the illegal immigration and the trafficking and all that came through at the time. It moved further west eventually, but not during Paul's tenure, which is important. Because, as I said, everything's weird with Paul. He's in an open marriage. He's weird about his hair. He goes to Chiricahua. He gets fired. And they had wanted to get rid of him for a long time. I forget exactly what the final straw was off the top of my head. They wanted to fire the guy.
You sure that wasn't a pun there?
It was not intentional, but yeah. So they accused him of stealing straw for his wife's horses, and of course he was like, "I'm not doing that," and he sued. And the lawsuit went on for 5 years. During the course of this lawsuit, Paul Fugate goes and gets a master's degree in botany.
How long was this lawsuit?
5 years. I just said that 4 times.
No, I know, but sorry, it took a minute to process both that it was 5 years and that in that time, after being fired from the National Park Service, the person that you're describing also went and got a master's degree.
While the lawsuit was happening.
Yeah. Someone who got fired for essentially smoking weed on the job. Not we don't know about on the job, but showing up late, things like that, then went and did that. Sorry, I got academic whiplash from that. So that's why it took me a second to process.
Don't judge a book by its cover kind of thing, right? I think Rivers Cuomo, the lead singer of Weezer, has an off-the-charts IQ, but he's the lead singer of Weezer. So, it's don't judge a book by its cover.
Yeah.
Some of those people who seem like they're maybe just not all there are, in fact, just not caring about your opinion.
I love that.
And that's the kind of guy Paul appears to have been. But he wins his lawsuit, and rather than, going and getting a PhD, going to work for one of the big agricultural companies and sitting pretty, having a nice, bougie corporate job, making good money, all that, he goes back to work for the Park Service at the very park he had been fired from. Like I said, weird case. He's there a little while. And then I want to say it was either 1970 or maybe 1975. Like I said, I'm pulling this from memory right now. He goes out one day and he tells the aide he has, because it's over the summer. Sorry, no, not over the summer. It was, I think over the winter. It was the off season at the park. He tells his aide, "Hey, I'm gonna go walk some of the trails. Should be back by 4:30, but if I'm not, just lock up without me." Because again, he lives at the park. He has a cabin on the park grounds, where during the in-season, he would often have a guest. That guest's name was not released, but I think they called her Bonnie in most of the article. There's a really good piece on this. I say what it is in the full video. I can't remember what it's called, though, right now. But Bonnie, she's never named her proper name at her own request. She would stay with him frequently. She was a 19-year-old at the time they had met. He was, I think, 39. And she was a seasonal worker at the park, and they developed a connection, so to speak. And she would just be a guest with him sometimes. And even in the off season, she would sometimes be a guest with him. So she comes and stays with him for a couple weeks, and then she heads on home. A little bit after that, we're talking not long here, within I think a month, Paul tells his aide, I'm going to walk the trails. I'll be back in a little while. If I'm not back by 4:30, lock up without me. Paul is not back by 4:30. Paul is not in the next morning. Paul is not in when Paul would be expected to be in later that day. People start to realize Paul shouldn't still be gone. So they go up and they check his cabin, and Paul's not there. Then they call Dodie, his wife, and they tell her that Paul's not there, and they don't know what's happened. They launch a search for him. They're a little confused because if anybody should know how to not get lost in this park, it's Paul. He spends all his time out there, right? In fact, according to Dodie, they had been planning to fix up a larger abandoned property on the premises, and that she was supposed to be moving to the park to live with him. Now, little issue with this plan. Bonnie, when she came to visit a couple weeks, for a couple of weeks a little bit earlier, Dodie had planned on this being Bonnie's last visit because she felt that Bonnie and Paul were getting too close. Bonnie intended to use that visit to possibly tell Paul some important information. She was pregnant. And she knew this for certain by the time that Paul went missing, and she was called in because she had seen him recently and she knew him well, and she might be somebody who could help them find him. It's unclear exactly when Dodie learned that Bonnie was pregnant. It's also unclear exactly when Paul learned that Bonnie is pregnant. It could have been when Bonnie and Dodie met up there. It could have been a little bit earlier when Dodie accompanied Paul to the airport to pick Bonnie up for her visit, which was her way of saying, according to her, this relationship is over. This is the last time. So one of the suggestions, of course, then as people started to realize this was, Bonnie or Dodie might have had reason to do something about Paul, and Paul might have had reason to do something about Paul, because he was now in a situation where the woman he was, above all else, not to develop an emotional connection with is carrying his baby. And if he knew that, that might have driven him to do something like, I don't know, leave work a couple hours early one day to walk the trails, tell his aide, if I'm not back by 4:30, lock up without me, knowing that nobody else would expect to see him until sometime mid-morning the next day. And then he could have made the trek 80 miles south to the Mexican border. So there were a lot of possibilities here. Maybe Dodie is fed up with her husband for, having an open relationship, because when she signed on for it, she was okay with it, but now she's jealous. Things can change. Maybe Bonnie, maybe she wasn't willing to have a baby with a man who was married to somebody else. Maybe it would look better if she could tell people the baby's dad had died. There's a lot of things that could have happened. And the problem is, as they went and they looked for it, everything they found, every new turn, was wrong for some reason. There was allegedly somebody who saw him in a car driving away, but nobody could place the car. Nobody could place who was in the car. Nobody could find the car. There was no record of the car being there. So it was hearsay. Another suggestion was that somebody had heard a commotion down by a ranch on the western side of the park, the faraway ranch. Dodie claimed that she had seen some unsavory characters down there, and that was also the spot where she and Paul were allegedly planning to build their new life, right? Other people suggested that maybe he came across some drug smugglers and, was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. But the side of the park he was going to when he left, in fact, the only side of the park that would have made any sense to go to, because to the right, to the east, it would have just been desert, that wasn't the side that had smuggling issues. That was the eastern side of the park. Paul Fugate left the headquarters, walked somewhere northwest of them, and then just vanished. And to this day, nobody knows what happened to him. What what has been pointed out is that a few years later, after, I don't remember the exact number of years, but years on after Paul's disappearance, somebody who had a training class with him in the Park Service way back when, in the early 60s, was at a bar in, I think it was Arizona. Might have been Texas. It was one of the border states near the border. I want to say it was Arizona in one of the border cities. It's going to drive me insane trying to remember. He says that as he was in there and he was sitting down, he was having his drink and everything, a guy that looked exactly like Paul Fugate, just like 20 years older, walked in, ordered a beer, drank half of it, they made eye contact, and he quickly left his half-finished beer on the table, got up, and walked out of the bar. Immediately after making eye contact with this guy. So what that guy did was he went and he collected the glass that this man had been drinking from. He brought it in to the Park Service and said, "Hey, I think I saw Paul Fugate. Can you test this glass for prints?" So they run the prints, and wouldn't you know it, Paul Fugate did not have his fingerprints on file with the National Park Service.
Think that was intentional, or you think that's just a lucky break for good old Paul?
I have absolutely no idea. Now, it was the 1970s. It could have very simply been that they had one copy of Paul's fingerprints, and when he got fired the first time, they shredded it or something. They got rid of it, and then when he was rehired, they didn't re-fingerprint him. Could have been as simple as that. I also should clarify, because I think I left out a bit of a major detail here. There was an unfinished life insurance policy found in his unfinished life insurance policy application found in his cabin, and also him disappearing on the job, if he was presumed dead, would have netted Doty not just any life insurance policy that he had actually filed, but also his pension. And that could have been a reason. Now, one of the suggestions has been that he and Bonnie maybe planned to abscond together with the baby, and that Doty would be okay because she would get the money from Paul's pension. Bonnie, however, I don't believe ever left the country and does not currently live with Paul. Doty, there was another weird thing that just came to me, which was Paul's, when the reporter who did this, again, incredible piece of journalism, it's killing me that I can't remember the name. When the reporter did it, he went and he talked to Doty, and in Doty's house, as he walked in, there was a chair that had clothes laid out on it. And Doty told the guy that these were Paul's like day clothes, or not his day clothes, like his civvy clothes. I think she said his civvies. And she said this is what he would have worn when he got back from work and changed out of his uniform. And that bugged me because she did not live with him at the park. And Paul didn't seem like the kind of guy to select his outfit for the evening the night before. And he was a guy that came into work late. He probably wasn't doing it in the morning either. And then the journalist went and he looked up the exact designs of those clothes and found that I think the shirt, might have been the pants too, but I think one of the articles of clothing, I think it was the shirt, had not been released at the time that Paul disappeared. In fact, it might have even been a women's shirt. And that, that was odd to me. I think the one option here that looks, I guess the least bad, because Bonnie ultimately, I think, had an abortion. The one option where where the only victim is the National Park Service is that Paul and Doty, for whatever reason, maybe it was the situation with the baby, maybe it was that things had just run their course, but Paul and Doty, despite loving each other, maybe decided they weren't meant to be married anymore. And, they wanted to figure out a way that this made sense. Because if they got divorced, Doty was kind of screwed. She had nothing. Paul had been the breadwinner for years. She would have been in trouble without him. And he did not make the kind of money that an alimony was going to be enough. So they couldn't just get divorced. One possibility would be that they planned for Paul to leave, run away to Mexico, and that the reason that this life insurance policy existed was that the idea was to frame it as he had died and she would get the payout, the pension, the policy, all that. Maybe she would wire some of the money down to Mexico. Who knows? And then maybe Bonnie being pregnant threw a wrench in this plan, or maybe, there was, some change in things, or maybe it went off the way it was intended to, and Bonnie being pregnant was just like a weird coincidence that happened to be going on at the same time. In that case, we have Paul making sure Dodie is set up, and then escaping to live the life he actually wants to live in South America. When you consider the fact that there was that supposed sighting of him years later in southern Arizona at like a city that I don't think there's another city along that road until you hit Mexico. There's a lot of options here, a lot of possibilities, but it was a very weird case. I left out some of the details, not necessarily intentionally, because I'm trying to keep this abridged. I would highly recommend going and watching the full video. It's a cool case, very strange, and probably one of my favorites to have researched. I did it while we were down in New Orleans with Wendigoon. But yeah, I found that one to be fascinating. But I think what might surprise people is it's not always the missing 411 cases that are the most interesting to me, and it's not always the unsolved ones. Sometimes just getting into the head of one of the people involved in this is an interesting thing all its own. And the other thing is that when that's kind of my favorite part of it, I think, is the psychology of trying to understand what was going on here. But then there's the other thing is, most of these cases, when we look at them, a lot of people think there's something paranormal going on with Missing 411, that it's Bigfoot or aliens, or, one idiot suggested it was the Wendigo doing it. Jackass has 1.2 million followers on TikTok too.
Oddly enough, 3 years ago.
Yeah, weird. I think it contributed to our rise.
Yeah.
Anyway, a lot of people think that paranormal stuff is involved, and there have been a few Missing 411 cases where I've been like, all right, I can't find a normal explanation for this. But what you rarely see, and the reason that this next one was so interesting to me, is the paranormal influencing people to do something. And this, again, it's not really a Missing 411 case. Yeah, it involves a girl getting lost and going missing in the woods, but it's a small patch of woods in a town in Ohio. You don't often see the idea of a paranormal entity inspire somebody towards violence. It happens on occasion, sure. And I'm sure there's going to be somebody chuckling about it going, well, how about religion? And you know what I meant. Sure, religion has been involved in many, many conflicts, but here I'm not talking about religion. I'm talking about Slenderman. And I'm specifically here, we're talking about not just something paranormal, but something that is wholly and totally fictional, right? Slenderman is something that developed on the internet over the last 15, 20 years. It's not a real thing. But the problem, Aiden, is that the internet has children on it.
As much as parents try to avoid that,
Yeah.
It is somewhat unavoidable nowadays.
Children really just shouldn't be on the internet in any capacity.
No.
It's
Having been a child who was on the internet, I wish I hadn't been.
Yeah, I think our generation is going to be a lot more strict. We're gonna seem a lot more like our parents when it comes to the internet, probably
Without
worse.
question.
But point is, this is a case where maybe that should have been happening. For those who, some of you probably have caught on, some other people might not be familiar with the case, but I want to say, what was it, 2014?
Roughly around that time, yeah.
Around 2013, 2014, Slenderman compelled two girls to stab their friend. And I don't mean that Slenderman appeared to them in their dreams. I don't mean that Slenderman appeared to them in physical form. I don't even mean that somebody dressed up as Slenderman or chatted with them on Tumblr pretending to be Slenderman. I mean that these girls were convinced that if they killed their best friend, they could go live in Slenderman's mansion in the woods, which I did not know this during the process of researching this. I was informed of it afterwards. Apparently, back in the 2010s, when everything was weird and stupid, There was this belief, or at least this fandom of Slender Man, where he was the king of the cryptids, and a whole bunch of them, like Jeff the Killer and others, lived in a mansion deep in the woods somewhere in the Midwest.
I'm sorry, there was a cryptid hype house?
Yes, Skibbity, Ohio.
Does that have anything to do with the current Skibbity thing?
That was the joke, is it was Ohio.
Okay,
But
got
I
it.
just thought saying it was in Skibbity, Ohio might make the kids chortle.
Got it. Okay, just making sure. I'm so out of the loop, I had no idea.
Yeah, no, it's the Skibbity Toilet, Ohio, or whatever the kids are saying these days.
My brain's officially rotted.
Something about the Rizzler.
W-Riz, Buckaroo.
Yeah.
I don't know.
W-Riz Buckaroo.
Yeah.
I want that on a shirt. That is hat. W-Riz Buckaroo.
See, but here's the thing. I made myself sound like a boomer there. Completely unintentionally, but I did it.
No, I know. It's beautiful.
It actually belongs on a polo for the type of like vibe it gives off.
Yep. You know, I wish we could keep the podcasts this focused, because this is kind of like if the podcast was staying on track for once.
Basically, yeah. And if you want to see us speak in this format in a live form,
We do that a lot.
We do
every
that
Sunday at 7 p.m.
every Sunday, just like this. Like you said, though, this is a little bit more focused. Shockingly
We're
enough,
trying to keep it focused.
I don't understand how it is.
I don't know.
This is the same thing we do that. We'll
I
find out.
think it's the chat being there.
It might be.
Messes with me. Anyway, we're talking about Slenderman. Yeah, there was a whole thing about a mansion, right? I'm trying so hard to like remain focused and not incredulous on how this story goes down. But so the way that the story unfolds and the way that most people remember it based on what I was seeing online is that Anissa Weir and Morgan Geyser, both were friends with this girl, Peyton Leutner. One of the girls was better friends with each of them than they were with each other, and I believe it was Morgan. That was the one that was close with both of them.
Yeah, I think she brought Anissa and Peyton together.
Anissa and Peyton together. Yeah, so the way it worked out, and y'all remember middle school? Morgan was friends with Peyton, and then Morgan became friends with Anissa. And Anissa was really like super duper into Slenderman. And Morgan, if I remember correctly, is schizophrenic. Right?
Is Morgan or is Anissa?
I think it was that Morgan was schizophrenic, and they claimed Anissa, who was the mastermind of the whole thing, had some sort of developmental disability or something like that. If I remember correctly, that was kind of seen as maybe being a little sketchy. Like, I don't think it was ever defined particularly what it was, nor was it a psychotic disorder. Whereas Morgan's was, and it is entirely possible that I am mixing these two up right now. If I am, I apologize. Entirely possible, though, that the lawyer basically found a way to say, hey, listen, clearly there's something wrong with her. We don't know particularly what it is, but she needs help, not juvie. Which, admirable on the part of the lawyer, except for the part where Anissa Weir may not have any developmental disorder aside from antisocial personality disorder. And if she does have antisocial personality disorder, then there is no way to, that's different than claiming insanity. And the reason this is important is that the way the story was framed was Anissa and Morgan seriously believed that Slenderman was real and that they needed to kill Peyton Leutner in order to appease him and to go and meet him. Now, that's one of the common versions. Now, I dug into it. That's weird enough on its own. And I mean, rude of the camera again, but as I was saying, weird enough on its own. So in order to lead her to her doom, they decide that they're going to do it in a park. It wasn't a park. They decide they're going to do it during a sleepover. And they were going to, while Peyton slept, they were going to stab her numerous times or cut her throat, whatever, kill her with knives was the point. and then they were going to cover her up in blankets and leave immediately. So they were going to make it look like they were all just asleep and then get away during the night. So they all have a sleepover, and they had been planning the sleepover for Morgan's birthday. I think it was her 13th birthday. They go, and the girls get cold feet. For whatever reason, they decide they can't do it. I think it was Morgan specifically who was like, I can't, I need, not on my birthday, I need one more night, whatever. So the next morning, they go out to a playground, and they're going to do it in the bathroom, like the public bathroom at the playground. Playground's at a park. But can't do it there either, because obviously it's going to be very loud. I can't remember exactly what it was that got in the way that stopped them. I think it was that Peyton was just too alert, and they took her into the bathroom, and they just couldn't find a way to get her to be, off guard, so that somebody had the opportunity to take the shot. And it was supposed to be Morgan that initially went for it, and then Anissa was going to, pile on top and make sure the job got done. But they fail to do it in there because they can't get the jump on her. So they decide they're going to go play hide and seek, and they go into the woods. And I want to stress, when I heard this story the first time 10 years ago, my understanding was that we were talking about woods, like acres and acres of forest. We're talking about like a patch of woods in a small park. Maybe 500 feet by 500 feet. This is not a big area. Big enough, however, for them to get into it, and then for them to tackle Peyton, and for Morgan to stab her a whole bunch of times. And this is where things start to get weird again, is that, again, the way the story is usually told is that Morgan, one of the girls stabbed her, and then the other one held her down, but didn't stab her. I think the one that held her down in these stories was Anissa. Morgan and Anissa, after stabbing Peyton and trying to leave her for dead, they leave the forest, thinking that they've done what they need to do, and they start heading north on the highway along the side of the road. Literally just heading up north because they think there's a forest up there where they can find Slenderman. Again, just crazy. Peyton did not die. Peyton bled a lot, but they managed to miss all of her major organs and not sever any important arteries. She crawls her way out to the road, which, again, keep in mind this was a small park, was like 50 feet away. Gets picked up, I think, by a cyclist who takes her to the emergency room. She then explains what happened to her, and the police, I think not 3 hours later, apprehend the other two girls walking along the highway. They come back, and, Morgan, from what I recall, was like, just couldn't comprehend what was going on. She was like, but if I didn't do it, Slenderman was going to kill my parents. Anissa didn't really match that. Anissa didn't seem to be willing to talk about everything. Anissa had no remorse. Morgan could understand that what she had done was wrong. Anissa, not so much. She just seemed like she was, confused about why she was there. And like, she hadn't hurt anybody. What she had done was necessary, right? And that got people thinking a little bit. Anissa had never been suspected of having any kind of psychotic disorder. Morgan, on the other hand, was known to have schizophrenia, and her parents were trying to avoid having her on too much medication. So they were kind of playing it by ear, seeing how her schizophrenia developed. That made her extremely susceptible to delusions and fantasies if they were planted in her head. And what we're talking about here is 12-year-old girls who already are some of the people most susceptible to delusions and fantasies. I mean, like, that's not a dig. That's not I have little sisters who I watched go through this. They would see things that weren't real about themselves. It's, you could convince girls that age that, they are, and often this happens, you can convince them that they are just worthless and that, in order to mean anything, they need to do something. And this is how kids get taken advantage of. It's just usually, it's not another kid doing it. It's usually when a 12-year-old girl is taken advantage of, it's usually not another 12-year-old girl behind it. At least not on her own, driving the whole thing. You might see it as an accomplice for an older person, but you don't see that at that age group. It just, the thought process isn't there because most 12-year-old girls are emotionally around the same level. They're not going to have the sheer cold-heartedness to think, I'm going to manipulate this person to harm this person to appease Slenderman. You know? That's the kind of thing that Anissa would have had to have been crazy for. It doesn't seem that way. It seems like what happened is that Anissa was clear-headed throughout the entire thing and was jealous of Peyton, who had been friends with Morgan longer, who didn't enjoy talking about creepypastas with her and Morgan, and would, say, if you guys are going to talk about that, I'm not going to hang out here at the lunch table. So Morgan would not want to talk with Alyssa about the things Alyssa enjoyed so that Peyton would feel welcome. What does this sound like to you?
To me, it just sounds like she was trying to eliminate the issue of her life by therefore getting rid of Peyton, so that way she could talk about the things she wanted to talk about with the friend that she wanted to talk about them with.
Yep. If you put it into those, if you frame it properly, and you look at all of the evidence as it sits out there, what you see is precisely that. These are 3 12-year-old girls. Now, even sociopaths do feel things like envy and jealousy. They still want things they don't have. It's not from the same emotional place all the time, but those aren't really emotions. Those are impulses. They're urges. Emotions are complex. They're what make us human. It's to feel something for somebody else. You're not feeling something for somebody else when you feel jealousy. You're feeling want for yourself. You want that thing somebody else has. Now, it doesn't matter that if she was a sociopath, she probably didn't care at all about Morgan. Morgan was her property. That's the way it would have been seen. So if we have a girl who's actually displayed sociopathic tendencies, as Anissa had and has, that opens us up to the possibility that she saw Peyton as just an obstacle and a threat. And one way that she could make sure Morgan was hers for good was to convince Morgan that they were going to see Slenderman and then get off into the forest after killing Peyton. No competition, no parents, no outside controls. This mentally ill girl would have been completely under her control. Is it insane? Yes. Is it poorly thought out? Because how the hell were they going to eat food once they got there? Also, yes. Did it occur to me that maybe Anissa was not necessarily the one ultimately pulling the strings? Also, yes. I just could find no evidence of it. That was one thing that came to me, was like, were these girls being manipulated? Like, was there an adult somewhere who was, using Slenderman to get them to want to visit this spot out in the woods, and Peyton wasn't going along for it, so he had to get rid of her? That was a possibility, and that shifts the blame from Anissa, but the problem is that there's no evidence of this. Now with Anissa Weir, when they were ultimately apprehended and they were questioned, as I said, Morgan showed remorse. Morgan appeared to be a schizophrenic teenager who had just been through something traumatic. Anissa did not. She was cold, calm, calculated the whole way through. She was that way during the trial. If you watch the videos, it is frightening. Watching just the disparity between the two of them. But Peyton ultimately recovered from her injuries. She graduated, and last I checked, I believe she was in medical school, looking to be a doctor. She took this and made it, basically took it as a inspiration and drive to go into medicine and help other people, which is a great silver lining to everything. Also, there is an episode of Criminal Minds called The Tall Man that did a really interesting job of taking this story and not just cloning it for TV, not just, changing the names of the characters, changing the location as they usually do. They switched up basically who the mastermind was and how the events transpired. It was actually a really cool take on it that was more looking at the angle of what if the kid wasn't the mastermind. So I really liked how they did that. Lots of compliments for that show. But as much as I've loved looking at the strange, that's just strange. Obviously, I have the background in history, right? My favorite stories have always been the historical ones. Roanoke. I mean, I don't know. When did you first hear about Roanoke?
I think it had to be from you. I think it was back in high school. Oh, yeah. You know what? It was from you because you're the reason I started watching Supernatural. And part of the reason you wanted me to watch Supernatural because at one point you were talking about the Lost Colony of Roanoke.
Yep.
And you were like, what do you mean you've never heard about it? And I was like, why would I know about some random thing from like the 1600s or whenever it was at the time that I thought it was?
He and I had only very recently become friends at this point.
Yeah, it had
been like a few months.
Yeah, it was literally because we became friends in sophomore year of high school and...
We were down at the beach.
Yeah. And that's when, because I had heard about Supernatural, but I had only heard about the fact that it was like really big on Tumblr. And me as a teenage guy, I was like,
oh, I don't want to be anywhere near that.
Yeah, I was like, that doesn't sound like it's my thing. And then you were like, just watch the first episode with me. And thus began an obsession.
Yeah, we have both seen the show all the way through, probably multiple times.
Oh, without a doubt. Yeah. It very much inspired the car I have. It inspired, a large portion of our wardrobe throughout the majority of high school and college.
What we do for a living.
Yeah, this wouldn't exist without Jensen Ackles and Jared Padalecki getting cast in a random show by Eric Kripke that started in 2005, which is hilarious. Thank you so much for that.
It was really cool of you. If you ever want to come on the show, please do.
Yeah, you're welcome to.
We'd love to meet you.
We would.
Same thing with M. Night. We would love to talk to you too.
Considering I went to your high school and college, I think it'd be cool.
Yeah, he's basically you.
No. No. I'd love to be.
Number of close similarities.
Such as?
Anyway, point of this episode was... point of this conversation was to cover the Roanoke story. Because when I first heard of it, it was not from Supernatural, actually. Supernatural was when I became genuinely interested, I would say. I first heard of it from... trying to remember the name of the book series, but it was the book series was basically about these kids who were kidnapped from time by people from the future who went back to rescue kids who were about to have bad things happen to them. Yeah, I can't. Like I said, it's been so long. I think the book was called Taken.
This sounds like Codename Kids Next Door meets Minority Report.
Yeah, it was a good series. It was a cool series back then. I can't remember the name though. It's driving me insane. Point is, that's how I first heard about it. And if I remember correctly, that basically the idea was that the entire colony of Roanoke had been taken by people from the future. If I'm remembering that correctly. What really got me interested, though, was definitely Supernatural because of that episode with Croatoan, where they were like, wait a second, what's going on here? Why do people keep carving the word Croatoan in places? Like, what does this mean? And in the episode, it's a virus. It's like a zombie plague virus. First time it shows up, it's limited, small town, whatever. But they eventually connect it back to Roanoke. And when it comes back later, it's apocalyptic. But they tell the story of Roanoke and the Croatoan thing, and they come to realize that, Roanoke must have been like the first time this showed up. It must have been the test run for whatever demonic kind of, thing is going on here. So the version of the story I always heard was the English established a colony at Roanoke, and then when they came back to check on it a few years later, it was just gone. No one knew what had happened. They had carved the word Croatoan into a post. That was it. Nobody had any idea where they'd gone. Now, that one part that was left out of that version, if I remember correctly, was the Dare Stones, which are dozens of rocks with inscriptions carved into them, that ultimately were, I'll get to it in a second, but there were dozens of rocks with inscriptions that were attributed to Elizabeth or Virginia Dare, who were two of the colonists. Virginia Dare was the first English woman born in the colonies. So, The way the story actually goes is that there were 2 Roanoke colonies, not one. The first one was sent as a military-only expedition. Their plan was to set up a post on the east coast of what would eventually become the United States, and they were going to use that as a staging point for any further exploration and later colonization. It did not go particularly well. They got over from England. They established their fort on Roanoke, and they quickly got into a little bit of conflict with the local natives. There were a few different tribes. They were all Carolina Algonquian speaking. One of those was the Secatan. They were mainlanders. Another of those was the Croatan. They were islanders. If I remember correctly, there was in fact a small Secatan village on Roanoke, and the Secatan ended up basically being like, we'll chill with you. And then ultimately that village on the island went away and moved back onto the mainland, if I'm remembering that part correctly. But the reason things didn't go very well is because of a guy named Philip Amatus. Right? Am I remembering this right?
That sounds right.
I believe it was Philip Amatus, who was a captain along for the voyage, and he was sent out with a group of men to look for a stolen cup. Somebody had lost a silver cup, and they had assumed it had been stolen by the Secatan. Now, they chose to, rather than accepting when the natives said, we don't have the cup, rather than accepting that or moving on, they decided, no, you guys know where the cup is. And they burned a Secatan village to the ground. Not getting off on the best foot. Somehow the Croatan managed to smooth this over. They make it so that the Secatan aren't going to war with the English. And I want to make it very clear, there's not that many Englishmen there. There's like 100 of them. They had brought 600 along. They planned to leave 100 of them. Half the ships got turned around on the voyage. They ended up getting in trouble, like getting attacked by some Spanish people at one point. They had landed on an island to get supplies after being blown off course by a storm. The whole plan was to buy things from the Spanish. They then realized the Spanish were likely just going to attack them and take their ships, so they left early. The whole thing's a mess. But anyway, they have their little settlement. And over time, things do not go great. They end up in conflict with the Secatan. They end up running out of supplies. They end up needing to leave. So what they do is they get back into their remaining ships. They leave behind a garrison of, I think it was something like 13 men to watch over the island. And then they head home. And I'm trying desperately right now to remember if this was something that happened during the first colony or the second colony. Might have been the second. But the big conflict that happened was the leader of the Secatan. He ultimately decided that the Englishmen were bad news. They were not to be trusted and they needed to go. The Croatan did not agree with this. But the English sent along an exploratory party, I believe it was under Ralph Lane, who went west along the river. And what Pamisipon, the leader of the Secatan, did was he went to the English party and he said, hey guys, just so you know, when you get in there, if you plan to go further in, because at this time they weren't openly hostile, if you plan to go further in, you should know the tribes in there are going to be hostile towards you, and you should make sure you're heavily armed and well supplied. He then sent envoys to the natives to the west of him and told them, hey, a heavily armed party of Englishmen is coming your way. You should go stop them. So I left something out of what they told the Englishmen. He said that a war party, a war council had gathered to plan to attack the English. I forgot about this is how it went. Yeah. So this was the first colony. He told them, Pamisipon goes to them and he tells them, hey, the natives to the west of me, I love you guys. We're besties. But the guys to the west, they don't like you so much. And they called a war council. I was invited to it and I decided to tell you because I don't want you to get hurt. And then he went to the people on the west and said, hey, the English are planning to attack you. You'll know this because they're going to be heavily armed coming up the river. Thankfully for the English and the natives of this region, cooler heads prevailed, and when they arrived, they realized they'd been tricked by Pimicipon. Was not great for anybody at that point because now nobody trusted anyone. Ultimately, the English decide they need to leave. They leave behind 13 men. A few years later, they try to send back another colony, and that is led by John White. Or John White is one of the prominent members, I should say. Not necessarily the total leader, but one of the prominent members. And so they get down there, and they set up a civil colony. And this time they're going to try and work with the people around them, not fight them. And it goes well, At first, there's a little bit of trouble, but they eventually, they're producing enough food and everything's going all right. Everything's going okay. Until eventually it's not. They are running out of food. They are unable to expand. They need supplies. There was supposed to be a supply ship, and it hasn't come. And the Secatan still don't really like them all that much. Even though the goal here was to try and smooth things over, the Secatan are still not huge fans of the colonists. My nose itches. So John White goes back, and he needs to find supplies. He doesn't want to leave, but everybody says, we need somebody to go back to England and convince them to send more ships, more supplies, and some soldiers, because we're going to need them. And White says, I really don't want to go. I'd rather lead the colony. He was the governor. And he's like, I would rather lead the colony. I would rather stay here and send somebody else. And they said, no, you're the only one they'll listen to. You need to go. So White returns to England. And then a funny thing happens. England and Spain, what had been a bit of a Cold War, privateering back and forth and whatnot in the colonies, becomes a very hot war. The whole Spanish Armada thing? Yeah. Every single ship capable of carrying a gun is recalled to England. The English do not have a big enough navy. They have a good navy, but it's not the English Navy yet. This is the 1580s.
Ah.
The English Navy is not yet the British Navy. It is the English Navy.
When does it officially? It's got to be at least early 1700s, right?
It's the colonial era.
Yeah.
As Jamestown gets spun up, and as they need to be shipping things back and forth across the ocean, that's when the British Navy becomes the British Navy.
Yeah, because I know by the early 1800s they were well established as the
even during the American Revolution. Immediately after the American Revolution, the British had the largest, I believe it was the largest navy in the world, and also definitely the largest trade fleet in the world. The United States had the second largest trade fleet in the world and 5 brigs.
Yep. Being a fan of John Paul Jones, I'm familiar with how the American Navy started, and it is a great story.
The great thing about it is that the British Navy was a force to be reckoned with, and the American Navy was basically just a cowboy version of it.
Basically, yeah.
Early 1800s, Jefferson's like, who is landing pirate ships and stealing people off the coasts? Oh, the Barbary pirates? I'm going to send a bunch of drunk dudes from the pub over there with guns, and they proceeded to just demolish everything.
Yep.
The U.S. Marines, everyone.
Yep.
Literally founded in a bar in 1775. Mm-hmm. I think as was the Army.
Yeah, the origins of the American military, all of the traditions still stem to the modern day versions of them in various different ways.
The origin of America stems to a bar.
It does. It really does.
He plotted the revolution in a bar.
Oh, the bar tab from the day they all signed the Declaration of Independence still makes me laugh every time I look at it.
I mean, to be fair, in 1776, you probably had to be absolutely plastered to think, we can take the British.
Yeah, without a doubt.
But as it turns out. Anyway, point of the matter is the second colony gets held up. The supplies get held up because of the war. And eventually, John White is in fact able to get ships approved to go and help the colony. They get down the western coast of Europe. They cross out to the Azores. And then they have to turn back. If I remember correctly, it was that their supply ship was taken by pirates. So either that or that they lost a ship due to weather. Again, you watch the main video. This is the one that's the most from the back of my memory, to be fair. The ship, so they have to turn back. By the time John White manages to get back to Roanoke, I think the first colony was 1585 and left in 1586. Second colony arrived, I think, in 1587. John White doesn't get back there until, I think, 1590. By the time he does, they needed supplies in 6 months. It had been several years. When he returns, he finds a very strange sight. The colony is still there. At least the buildings and the walls. There's no people. Not one. They find some buried chests that are still full of stuff. They find some not buried chests that have apparently been looted. And based on what was left behind, they assumed it was the Native Americans because it didn't look like the Spanish would have taken other things. The natives didn't take everything. They took specific items and less specific items. The Spanish would have taken everything, or at the very least taken the gold. The natives had no use for the gold. It didn't matter to them. Which is why I always think that the City of Gold stories are kind of funny. It's because it was, a lot of the time, it's like, do you not realize they were telling you what you wanted to hear? Which is, hey, we don't have any gold, but there's an entire city of it that way. They were sending you to your death, hoping you would die along the journey. And now we have El Dorado.
Good movie, at least.
Oh, it's a great movie. They had no business making that one girl that thick, though.
Do you want to keep that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I listen. No business.
It was Disney.
We were 7 years old.
Yeah.
That was not for us.
No. I don't know. Megara got me, so.
Fair. Fair. So, but anyway, John White returns to Roanoke. This is what the podcasts are like.
Yep.
John White returns to Roanoke. There's nobody there. There is the word Croatoan carved into a palisade post. And here's the part that's left out of most narratives. That was intentional. He had told them before he left, if you, for some reason, leave a sign of where you're going. And they wrote Croatoan, which just happened to be what they called the island directly south of them where the Croatan natives lived, who were friendly with them, who John White kind of immediately assumed they'd gone to see. That was one possibility. That's something that gets left out. The other thing is that he told them if they had left under duress, then they were to make the sign of the cross, but a specific kind of cross. It was not to be the typical Christian, just, two crossed lines. It was to be, I forget the proper name of it, but basically the Templar cross. They were to leave that behind if they were in danger. If they left under duress, there was no Templar cross found. So the assumption was they probably went over to the Croatan island. And I'm mixing things up here, I think. There was another voyage led by William Raleigh. And I think it was after.
Well, one of them didn't.
It was
make
after
it, right?
this one, yeah. It was after this one. So White, no, because what's bugging me is I remember there was one ship that got there after they had abandoned the colony and just assumed they couldn't get over to the Croatoan island because there was bad weather or something like that, and they just kind of assumed that they had gotten there safely. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to remember if that was before or after, because I know William Raleigh led an expedition himself at one point where he claimed he tried to go find them, but he was probably trying to find the City of Gold based on what he actually did, which was go to the Caribbean first.
I feel like what I'm remembering is that the first one was the one that got turned away by bad weather. Was it White's?
It might have been...
Because wasn't White really determined to get there,
Yeah,
and he didn't?
Yeah.
Because like it happened a couple times. It wasn't just one journey he tried to make. He tried to make like 2 or 3, and he couldn't do it every time.
If I remember correctly, what happened was that they saw the... I think what had happened is that they saw the sign that said Croatoan, and they assumed they had probably gone over to Croatoan Island, but they were unable to get there because of the weather. And basically the thinking was, oh, I'll come back. Basically, or I'll send somebody back for them. I think that's what happened. That's feeling right now. The video exists if people want to go check me.
Yeah, it's a good.
I recommend watching the video. I think we did a really good job on it.
We put a lot of work into it. So,
point is, I believe that was John White's voyage. Now, they never confirmed that they had made it to Croatoan. Today, there's not a ton of evidence that they did. You would have expected there to be a lot of genetic markers amongst the natives of the region. Now, it could be that when the English came in and settled and those groups were moved west, that they just intermingled so much that it's hard to tell who was a Croatoan. It's, again, like you'd have to test bones from the island against individuals who may or may not be. So you might be able to go and find it, but the kind of the belief was that they maybe didn't make it to Croatoan, or if they did, that they didn't stay there. Because you would expect that within the next 100 years, there would be reports of settlers getting there and going, wait a second, what's with all of these blonde-haired, blue-eyed, English-speaking natives? Like, what's going on? What is this? We know this because anytime they did encounter people who appeared to be blonde-haired, blue-eyed, English-speaking natives, they made a big fuss about it, over and over again. Even if they weren't blonde-haired, blue-eyed, and English-speaking, if they had remotely European features, they found some way to claim it was a cultural hero that had been there. It was just what they did for land claims at the time. That's where the whole legend of Madoc, the Welshman who supposedly landed in America, came from. And, don't get me wrong, I would love for that story to be true. I have found no evidence of it. I would like to, but I haven't. But yeah, so John White assumes they went to Croatoan. There's no evidence that they did. At least not left today. William Raleigh said he was going to try and pick him up, but he seems to have gone off to try and find the city of gold and stop by as an afterthought. Nobody ever goes to Croatoan Island to check. They keep saying they're going to, and then nobody manages to pull it off. So for a couple hundred years, about 400 years, nobody knows what actually happened. There's just, people who think maybe they built a boat and were lost at sea. But then why'd they write Croatoan? But they weren't there at Croatoan, so what happened? In the early 1900s, somebody stumbles across a stone. And it's got weird writing on it. It's English. It's not 20th century English. It's not even 19th century English or 18th century English. No, it is 16th century English in shorthand. And it appears to say, I believe, EWD at the bottom with periods between them, as in initials for Elizabeth Dare. And what it says is that only 7 people made it off of Roanoke, that they had been attacked by presumably the Secatan, and that they had escaped to the mainland. The location of this stone was very near to a river junction. And people wondered, hey, maybe they came here. But where'd they go after that? And why'd they come here? Why pass through Secatan territory? Why take the risk? As it turns out, not that long ago, within the last 10 years, I think it was, an archivist at a museum in Britain took a look at one of John White's maps. And there was a patch. So they took it and put it over a light board and looked under the patch. And what was under the patch was the pretty universal symbol for a fort. And it was right at that river junction where the stone was found. And the belief is that John White made that map and placed that fort there with the intention of establishing their permanent settlement there, where there were, because, it was like 50 miles away. Everything on the Dare Stone, I can't remember it off the top of my head, but everything on the Dare Stone suggested that there had been an attack by a Native American tribe. They had escaped, and they had eventually found refuge with friendly natives further inland. Now, of course, later expeditions, you've got Jamestown, you got people that go down with that group. They start hearing stories about, light-skinned natives with blonde hair and blue eyes who are to the south. They never find them, but they do hear the stories. And you also hear stories about structures, buildings that were constructed in the English style, 2 stories, made of stone. Not the way the natives built their houses. But you never see them. Nobody ever found them. So it's hard to tell if this is myth, is this exaggeration, did somebody actually see this, but they just didn't manage to find it again? What happened? It's believed that this stone tells the true story, or at least the closest thing to it, that this group of people attempted to start this colony. They were massacred for their trouble, and that then the survivors moved inland and integrated with the local Native American population. Unfortunately, if I remember correctly, the stone does say that Virginia, the child, did not make it, that I think she escaped the initial issue but then died of illness or something along those lines. Most likely the survivors remarried themselves into the Native American population, and by the time colonization was really underway, they might know. They might have stories about who their great-grandparents were. Or they might not. Or it just might not matter to them. There might just be so few people. And to be perfectly honest, with the way everything went, it could be that they survived, but then their descendants were wiped out by disease later on. Like, there's a number of things that could have happened. The fact of the matter is, we'll likely never know the exact story of the Roanoke colony. But what we do know is that even if it's not as mysterious as it seemed to be at first, there are so many complications here. I mean, from the ships that they had, like the very first voyage, ships go off course. People have mismatched maps. They are unable to have enough food. They accidentally start a war with the Native Americans. They escape, and then the men that they left behind, I forgot to mention this, never seen again. Just disappeared. The Croatan say that they were, implied that they were attacked at one point when the Croatan are actually encountered. Like, nobody knows what happened here. And then when they get back, just complication after complication after complication. The fact that the Spanish Navy prevented them from rescuing this settlement. The fact that once the initial Dare Stone was found, they put out a call for anybody who had come across them, and then one guy supplied them with like 50, and they all turned out to be fake, and nobody thought to look into the guy's background when he presented them. Turned out part of his job was making etchings in stone. You know how they realized that they were fake, Aiden?
How was that?
The English was wrong. He used words like rendezvous that were not in the English language in the 1580s.
Didn't do his research.
When I tell you that, like, linguists will catch the strangest of lies, because think about what kind of lies you have to be looking at that it's a linguist that figured it out.
Yeah. You got to be really in-depth. Oh, at that point, respect to the person who got it that far.
Exactly.
But at the same time, you really got to do your research to get it to the point where a linguist isn't going to figure it out.
I so badly want to just force a linguist to read Connor McDerry's Irish Wisdom Preserved in Bible and Pyramids. It was one of the Tartaria source books. Mm-hmm. And there's an entire chapter on how Hebrew and Irish are the same language.
If you want to see a video titled, I forced a linguist to read the entirety of that book, let us know, because we'll do it.
Yeah. I think that would be funny.
And we'll find a way to...
find Aram Natsorkong, kidnap him, and stick him into a basement. tie him to a radiator and force him to read McDairy.
Hopefully he won't mind.
It'll probably be fun. We'll compensate him for his time.
There we go.
But that brings us to, the end of the show. I think that's, the main things I wanted to talk about. And I know that this was not our typical format, so to speak, but
do we want to mention part of why it's not our typical format?
As in the podcast that will probably be going up the day after this one?
Probably, yeah.
Yeah. So part of the reason that we decided to do this, obviously we wanted to celebrate 3 years, do a little bit of a retrospective. We actually filmed a whole thing last night that we weren't able to use.
That will likely be on Patreon.
Probably be on Patreon. You might, depending on how long this is and how well it turned out, you might get some clips at the end as little funnies in a preview.
Considering we're at the end of this video, you've seen the intro. You saw all the people in the intro.
Yeah.
We did a segment with every single one of them last night.
Let me put it this way. You'll be entertained by the very reasons it's not on here.
Yeah.
Like, it's not on here because it's a little too silly.
Yeah.
But if you want to check it out, and I highly recommend doing so because you'll get to meet a number of people and also just be entertained, it'll be on our Patreon and our YouTube. So that will, if you become a member for $1, you'll get access to that. But yeah, the real impetus behind doing this way, though, was, it's been 3 years. We wanted to do something that captured the last 3 years of work and shared it in a more fun way. We do a sit-down documentary every Friday, and ironically, the whole idea when we started was teaching you history and weird concepts like you had just sat down at a bar. And over time became more and more like a college lecture, which was weird. But I like being able to do it this way and just kind of casually talk about things. I am stunned at the recall.
Well, and so am I, honest.
Like,
I'm not stunned because I'm so
thinking about it. I'm like, man, I pulled that out of the depths.
Yeah. Well, I got to say, but the other interesting thing is not just the format and how it's changed, but also your perspectives on a lot of these different cases.
Mm-hmm.
We went over a few of the really strange ones, but it's really interesting to think about how a lot of the people who watch us may still consider us unsolved mystery cases, like as the main portion of our channel, and conspiracies about like the national parks and things like that. Do you want to talk a little bit about like where you started with that, when we started, and how that's evolved over time?
So when I was first getting into this, it was, I was looking at all these Missing 411 stories and the folklore that I was aware of and going, hang on a second. Maybe there actually is something in the woods taking people. Maybe these stories didn't all come out of nowhere. What is it? All right, well, what's one that fits? The Wendigo. Okay, let's start there. And my thinking was, let's see. Is it possible that the Wendigo is taking these people? I'll admit I was a little bit more superstitious a person back then. But also, I had a misunderstanding of what a Wendigo was, Even though in my mind, I wasn't using the Hollywood version because mine didn't have antlers, I still wasn't quite right. And as I dug more and more into it, I realized that the Wendigo is, yes, there's definitely the spirit version of the Wendigo, but a lot of the accounts are men, from what it seems like, just human men who are particularly strong and immune to pain, but men all the same. And they're cannibals. They are human beings who turn to cannibalism. And the thing about that is, when you read the Wendigo stories and you look at what they are in reality as opposed to in Hollywood, first of all, there are real Wendigo stories, like of people who did in fact consider somebody to be a Wendigo because they were proven to have eaten human flesh, so they killed that person. And these people are often weird after eating the flesh. They have the hunger, They think that they have got to eat more people. To the Algonquin, it was a death sentence. If you committed an act of cannibalism, the only way you could feasibly do something like that is if you were irredeemably insane, possessed by the Wendigo. The thing is, while the Wendigo is probably not taking people in the national parks, the Wendigo may sometimes take people in the national parks. Like, one thing that I keep coming back to is the extent to which so many Sasquatch, quote unquote, stories sound like feral people. and how many Wendigo stories sound like feral people. And you think about how vast America actually is and how sparsely populated so many regions are. You could have wild men out there. Whether they're genetically distinct from us or not is, not really important. If you've got people living off alone who are not properly socialized, there's a chance that they are going to be, for all intents and purposes, a monster. Now, do I think that that is what is responsible for the majority of missing 411 cases? Not remotely. Almost all of them have a completely normal, mundane explanation, but every once in a while we come across something and I just have to go, what? I'm not going to sit here and say it's paranormal, but I guess you classify that as foul play. Did Bigfoot take Dennis Martin? Probably not. But would it be totally feasible that a human being took Dennis Martin? Yes. Would it be just as feasible, given the sheer size of Great Smoky Mountains National Park, that that person lived in the park? Also entirely possible. I look at those and I go, all right, you know what? Some of these are still mysterious. And we've covered a lot of Missing 411, and, that's... Since we've done so much of it and we've found so much that was not really anything, maybe weird, but not unsolvable, I wanted to look at the greater phenomenon. I just wanted to stop looking at just the most interesting cases and start looking at the rest of them. Because what I've been doing is basically going, all right, well, if there's not a ton of evidence for it, I'm not going to touch it because it won't make a full video. And I'll admit, wholeheartedly that a large part of the reason there are cases we haven't touched is because in looking at them, I was like, I can't afford to spend 3 days researching this and then have it be a 10-minute video. I can't do that. So I had to look at stuff that was particularly well documented. And then as I was reading through Missing 411 Eastern United States for last week's video, I realized that there was a way to do this, that I could look at more cases and, maybe see connections that I had missed beforehand as well. And that was to look at the clusters. So we're switching over the format there to, instead of looking at a specific Missing 411 case in each video, we're going to look at either a cluster or a section of a cluster. So you get a series of videos that are on the Northern West Virginia cluster, where the first one introduces the region, introduces the cases, and then gives you one of the cases. The middle one would then handle a couple, if there's only 3, then the middle one would handle the cases, and the third one would be an analysis video. If there's room for more videos, then you could have first video is the intro, and then you've got 4 videos on 1 or 2 cases each, and then an analysis video. So that's how we're going to be doing things from now on for the Missing 411 stuff. Everything else format-wise will remain mostly the same, but we're probably going to be heavy on Missing 411 for the rest of the year. Yeah?
Yeah, I think it's exciting. It's in a way back to our roots, but I think, those little, interesting tangential stories that we'll throw in every now and again should be fun, like the one in particular that we're preparing for in the next month or so.
Moon landing, right? Yep. So, every once in a while, we still will hit something that is culturally relevant, like the moon landing. We're coming up on, the 65th?
I think it was...
65th, I think, right? 69.
Yeah, so, yes.
68? 69?
Somewhere. It was in the 60s.
It was late 60s. It was either 68 or 69. I cannot remember for the life of me right now for some reason. Anyway, point is, it's that's something that was relevant for a number of content reasons. And then also, I think we're coming up on the 65th anniversary. If we're not, I might put 65th anniversary just to see if people call me out for being wrong.
I'm fairly certain part of the reason we chose it was because it was coming up on the anniversary. Yeah,
if we were wrong about that though.
It would be, unfortunately.
A little silly, a little goofy.
We are a little silly and goofy.
That's fair. Good point. You know what else I am, Aiden, is I'm tired.
So am I.
We've been shooting for 3 days straight.
Yep.
So, I know this was not your typical Lore Lodge episode. I know that retention right now is probably at 20%.
Hope you guys aren't too upset. Hope you guys are willing to, share this around so people will watch it.
And to be perfectly honest with you, a large part of the reason we did this week is because both of us are exhausted after literally 3 years straight of doing this.
Yeah, we haven't had a vacation.
Yeah,
ever.
If you look back, I don't think we've missed a week. We've sometimes missed a Friday and posted on a Saturday.
Yep.
I don't think we've ever, since we started this show, had a week where we did not post a video.
We're just trying to get to a point where we can.
Yep. So to be perfectly honest with you, part of the reason that this video is a different style is that Aiden and I needed to go EP buys.
Yes.
Aiden and I needed to go to sleep. We needed to rest.
Every week we exchange what days of the week we're going to stay up until at least 4 a.m.
Yeah, he's usually like Wednesday and Thursday, and I'm usually like Saturday and Sunday.
Yeah.
And not for the fun reasons.
No.
I'm not out partying. You know, while you guys are out partying, I am studying the Blade.
Yep.
And by the Blade, I mean whatever horrible tragedy we're covering that week.
My broth hurt. I have not been to a bar in years.
We were at a bar yesterday.
Past 12.
Okay, there we
in
go.
years. Or like, you know.
Like, what are you talking
More
about?
specifically, I've not like been bar hopping in years, primarily because on the times
Do a bar hop this year.
we should try if we the problem is that like those 2 nights of the week or the days after I'm not getting EP buys, so then I'm catching up on the EP buys I'm not having.
We're switching our schedule around so that we have weekends off now.
Yeah, we're gonna try. Well, we're starting a business, and now we need to be in this office building during business hours for the other channels that I'm helping film for and that we're producing.
Such a good job getting out of our 9-to-5s that we somehow ended up having 9-to-5s again.
Yep.
All right. Well, anyway, if you like what we're doing here at the Lore Lodge, you probably, honestly, if you've watched this video all the way to this point, you definitely know where to find us to help support us in other ways. But they are Patreon, YouTube members. You can buy our merch. That's coming from Bunker Branding very soon. We have Tableau Roasting Company for coffee. We have our other shows, The Weird Bible, The History Hut, The Lore Lounge, which still doesn't have any content on it, and my personal channel, Aiden Mattis. We also have several other channels coming that will not be hosted by us. That's that whole business thing we just mentioned. We will be doing Off the Record with Luke Eccles, a show about the music industry and music performances. We will be doing Last Call Lounge with Boozy Mixologist. He will also have how-to videos for cocktail making, and you will want to see them because good God, is this man a magician. And we also have Mentality something coming on. I'm not sure what they're going to...
Early stages of that one.
Early stages of development. That one's going to be about, small business development and fighting through adversity as a young man, and coming out in a good place, even though you've been to the depths.
Yep.
So I'm very excited about the next chapter, and I hope you guys are too. Thank you so much for hanging out with us tonight, and thanks for stopping by the Lore Lodge.